or watching this recording at home. The League of Women Voters is a 96-year-old volunteer organization of both men and women that encourage informed and active participation in government. We welcome your membership. We do not endorse or support political candidates or parties. Because we believe our democracy is best served by informed voters, we want you to submit questions to learn about the candidates. It is our goal to treat each candidate with fairness and courtesy. The views expressed by the candidates are theirs alone. Thank you to the candidates for running for office. You will be able to vote for a mayor and 2 city council members on November 8th. Each will have a 4-year term. Tonight, our moderator is from our League of Women Voters in Plymouth, Patty.
Good evening. I'm Patricia Robles, a member of the League of Women Voters Wayzata Plymouth area and your moderator this evening. This forum is sponsored by the League of Women Voters Wayzata Plymouth area, and on behalf of the members of the League of Women Voters, I welcome you. The purpose of this evening's forum is to provide you the opportunity to hear your candidates discuss face-to-face the issues that are important to you. The views expressed in this forum are those of the candidates, not those of the League of Women Voters, and the sponsorship of this debate is not an endorsement of any candidate. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any candidates or political parties. All viable candidates have been invited. The rules for this evening's forum are as follows. Each candidate will be allowed an opening statement with a maximum of 2 minutes to state his or her experience, platform, and objectives. A 15-second warning will be given before the total time has elapsed. Candidates, please finish your sentences quickly when you see the stop sign, or you will be interrupted. Opening statements will be given in alphabetical order, and the questions will be answered in rotating order. The answers will be confined to 1 minute. All candidates will have 2 minutes for a closing statement. No reference of a personal nature will be tolerated. A person's public record may be examined, but not their character. These forums are made available to encourage the voting public to focus on the issues. We ask that there be no demonstrations such as applause or booing of support or opposition to the candidates or their positions, and that all candidates be allowed their full time to get their point across. We will thank the candidates with applause at the end of the evening. Remember, if you have a question to write, please ask for a 3x5 card and raise your hand, and one of the League of Women Voters members will pick it up. Citizens will be electing a mayor and 2 city council members. The candidate for Minnetrista mayor is Lisa Whalen. The 3 Minnetrista city council candidates are Shannon Bruce, Steve Livermore, and Michael Molitor. We will begin tonight's forum by calling on the mayoral candidate, Lisa Whalen, to give her opening statement. Lisa?
I thought it was according to alphabetical order.
Oh, you know what? It was alphabetical. It's alphabetical order, except for, since you're running for the mayor, we decided to let you go first.
I get to go first.
There you go, instead of last. Sorry.
Well, thank you. Well, welcome everybody here this evening, and also those that might be watching later on YouTube. This is a real pleasure for me to be here once again. I have had the honor and the pleasure of serving Minnetrista for the past 2 years as your mayor, and I say that sincerely. It has been an honor and a pleasure. I've lived in Minnetrista for 31 years with my husband, Tom. We have 2 grown children. One is married. He has a lovely wife, and we have 2 grandchildren. I used to be a small business owner. I owned and operated my own business for 25 years. I'm an interior designer. Yes, retired, but they say once a designer, always a designer. And I've served on the council as mayor for 2 years. I completed the 2 years of Cheryl Fisher's 4-year term, and that's why it is actually a 4-year term, but My first time around was just 2 years, and I'm very excited about the opportunities for Minnetrista and the forward and positive process and progress that we've made. We have really completed a lot of projects. We've worked hard with staff, and I have to really give most of the credit to staff. They've done just a phenomenal job. Our staff-council relation is very, very good, and we have mutual respect, and we're just moving forward in such a positive manner that I really hope to keep that momentum going and to complete more projects and to complete more programs and implement more programs for our residents. Minnetrista is a great place to live. I love it here. We have so many beautiful amenities, lakes, streams, trails, parks, and we just want to make it better, and I want to be a part of that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Right now.
For the City Council candidates, Shannon Bruce, your opening statement, please.
Yeah, thank you for hosting this tonight. I'm Shannon Bruce, and I've lived and raised my family here in Minnetrista for the last 14 years, and my husband and I own a business, a small technology business named Trista Technology. We love Minnetrista. We love the beauty and the rural character of it, and protecting that is a high priority for us. We need to be careful what kind of development we allow here. We need to make sure that it fits and it enhances the unique character of Minnetrista. And I know City Hall has been challenged over the last several years, and I think we have some more work to do to build the public's trust and confidence in our city government. And I think it's going to take more than just open doors and transparency. I think it's going to take an unwavering commitment to the truth and the ability to listen and to understand and communicate with people that have differing viewpoints. I understand how local government is supposed to work because I spent 7 years as a government affairs specialist for AT&T. And a lot of that job was working with city councils and reviewing local ordinances and working with the municipal league. My undergraduate is in political science, and I've also done graduate work in public administration, so I also understand state and federal government as well. And that's important because the city deals with all kinds of issues all the time that cross those lines. And lastly, and most importantly, is I take the responsibility of stewarding your taxpayer dollars very seriously. My vote will always put Minnetrista first above any outside special interest. It will always protect personal property rights, and it will always support spending tax dollars wisely. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve Livermore, your opening statement, please.
Yes, thank you for hosting this forum. I really appreciate everyone showing up tonight, and welcome to anyone out there on YouTube. Much like I think all three of us, our families have lived here for 14 years. It's a common theme, except a little differently. I built out there one of the first homes out in the Turtle Creek subdivision. We love it out there. It was a job done very nicely by the city, and we really appreciate all that. My wife and 3 children, 2 are now out of the house. The wife works downtown. My oldest son lives in a group home in Brooklyn Center, which I'll get to later. Is one of the reasons I want to serve. My middle daughter is a student at the University of Minnesota in computer engineering. I'm very proud of her, and she's doing really well. And my son's a student at the Clearwater Middle School in Waconia. I want to talk a little bit about my background. I started life as a design engineer, or started my career as a design engineer, and I found out pretty early on that working in a lab and working by myself really wasn't part of my character. While I had the skills to be an engineer, I really had the personality to get out and do something more with people and more with organizations. Through a number of different career changes, I ended up as a consultant for the last 13 years. I work mostly with financial services industry. I do one of the jobs I have done is what we call the technology roadmap. And what that involves is something similar to what the city does around the planning commission, around the comprehensive plan. You look out 1 to 3 and 5 years, and you try and figure out where you're going to go with your technology, and then you build things in along the way that best returns investment on your dollar. So even though it may cost you a little more in year 1 to do something, it may make more sense because it saves you down the road or gives you more benefit earlier on in the process than if you wait to the end. And we always talk about roadmaps in that I always akin it to going on a travel trip, right? I can't get to California if I don't know where I'm going in California. Maybe I change my route along the way, but that's important. I want to bring one thing to the table here right at the end. My current team, we use a thing called HARD. We said what we do is hard, and we understand that it's hard. But we use that as an acronym to talk about being honest, being appropriate, and respectful and direct when dealing with other individuals on the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mike Molitor, your opening statement, please.
Hi, thank you for coming. My name is Mike Molitor. I've lived in Minnetrista for 14 years as well. I've lived here actually in 2 different locations within the city. I've been on the Planning Commission for the past 5 years, and that has been a very enlightening experience. I've got to meet a lot of people within the city, learn a lot, listen to people, and it's a very, I think, a good precursor to the council in that you learn the workings of the city and learn to listen to people and understand their concerns and really and try to be fair in dealing with the issues that come up. I'm also a member of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee, which is where we set direction and with what we want to do over the next 20 years or so with land use. And there's some exciting things going on right now with that, where we're looking at zoning in terms of densities as well as commercial zoning. So I've learned a lot on that. Also listened to a lot of public comment as well, really hearing what people have to say about that. My background is also in IT and in finance. I currently work as a consultant. I've worked for a number of large banks. I've done a lot of project management work as well as a lot of budgeting and financial forecasting as well. So a lot of that comes into play within the city government. Prior to moving here, I was a resident of the city of Crystal, and I was on their finance committee. I was also on their environmental quality committee. So there's some experience there as well in other cities' government as well. With my financial background, I also have a very keen focus on taxpayer dollars and where they're spent and how we invest that. And that's what I want to bring to the table as a council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we will start the questions. You will be given 1 minute to answer. First question goes to Mike Molitor. What is the biggest problem or challenge facing our city, and what would you do to address it?
I think the biggest challenge we face is how we handle new development, and what I would like to see there. First of all, we have to address that through our comprehensive plan. That's our guiding principle, and that's why I'm involved with how we are setting that going forward. We also need to make sure that when we look at the development, that we're taking into consideration the existing residents. I see that a lot on the planning commission where developers come in with a good idea. Unfortunately, a lot of that residual the bad effects of that go back to existing residents, and I think that needs to be addressed. And that's my biggest concern and how I would address that.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
Well, we have a diverse community, rural as well as developed areas. Yes, our developments are going to continue to be a challenge, and how to integrate them into a community that is largely rural still. But not only that, but we also have infrastructure needs, and we need to address those infrastructure needs. And the challenge with that is going to be can we do that in a fiscally responsible manner? That is going to be a big challenge for our city because our roads are in desperate need of attention. We've started to tackle that issue, and I've come up with a couple of ideas that we can implement next year. For one, we're going to bundle a bunch of projects together, and then for cost efficiency, and we're also going to bond for them with the low interest rates that we currently have. It makes a lot of financial sense to do that, and we can get a lot more bang for our buck if we start thinking outside the box and being creative with our tax dollars.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce?
I think the biggest problem facing Minnetrista is still, I think we have work to do getting the trust and confidence back of the public. And I think looking at how projects are initiated, making sure that those projects are initiated transparently and not, we have open meetings for the city council, but I think the planning commission and the parks commission, sometimes projects, that's where they get initiated. And all those forums need to be open and public. And transparent. So I think rebuilding the public trust, that's what I hear from people that I talk to in our neighborhoods, is they just want to know that the decisions that are being made openly and honestly without ties to special interests. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve Livermore.
It's always nice going last. I would probably agree with Lisa on the roads. I think that's certainly something that needs to be addressed and is an issue. The other thing would be parks and trails. I'm a big avid outside guy, and I think that while we have a lot of parks and the trails are in really good shape, I think there's a lot more work there that can be done. There's certainly the new park that's going over in Hunter's Crest is a big step forward in that area, but I would like to continue to see that moving forward. In addition to, I think there's a plan out there to do a master campus plan here for the City Hall. And I think that's an important part. I certainly agree with my candidates here that development and trust is important as well. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is, describe your vision, from your vision, what Minnetrista will look like in 2025. And number one will be Shannon Bruce.
Wow, 2025. You know, I'd love it to look like it does right now. I want Minnetrista to stay Minnetrista. I want to protect the beauty and the parks and the open spaces, and I love the fact that I can drive to my daughter's school and I can see my neighbors walking their cow down the road. I love that. So I love Minnetrista the way it is now. I know development is going to come, and we need to make sure that we're careful, that we choose the kind of developers that will build developments that fit the character of Minnetrista. We have a unique place here, and I don't want to see the city get so hungry for tax revenues that we sell our soul for tax revenues. So I'd like to keep it rural. I'd like to keep the character the way it is right now. But we're going to see development. We just have to be careful how we manage that.
Thank you. Steve Livermore.
I think in 2025, by that point, Kings Point Road development should be pretty well finished out. I think that's the plan there, around 10 years. I think that's going to take a lot of the majority of the development probably over the next 10 years. I think there's still going to be some pocket developments. I think as you see today, they're small, 5 or 6 or 8 or 10, 12. And those are done with the openness and the environment that we have in here today. So potentially by 9 years, we might actually see some retail development out there along 7. So I think that would not be a bad thing as long as it's done appropriately and the buildings and the construction is consistent with what we expect here in Minnetrista. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Molitor.
In terms of 2025, this is a big component that we're looking at in the comprehensive plan update. I think I agree with what's been said here so far. We like it rural here, and that's why we moved here. And we need to be considerate of how we grow. And we're looking at the comprehensive plan as to what areas of the city make sense to add new development and how to add it. And I think that's part of what we're looking at is the density that we're assigned from Met Council, how we spread that out, and how we can still keep the ruralness that we like, but yet meet the parameters that are set forth by the Met Council that we have to comply with. And that's a big challenge, and that's something we're working on, and I think we can make some improvement on that. And that's a big component, and I think that's very important, is how we handle that development.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen.
Okay, ask the question again, please.
Describe your vision, from
2025.
your vision, what Minnetrista should or will look like in 2025.
Okay. I think we all agree. We want to try and keep Minnetrista as rural as possible, and I think we will still be very rural even 8 years from now, because quite honestly, it's not that far out. However, with that being said, we will have development. There's no doubt about that. We have some properties in the MUSA currently, but what the City Council, we can't always decide who develops here, but we can decide how the developer develops, and we can control the developments that do come in. We can approve them or not approve them, and we do need to make sure that we protect our natural amenities and our resources here, and that the developments that we approve do fit in with Minnetrista. I'm not looking to expand our tax base significantly, but we do know that we are going to have more housing come in. So I think we're also going to be looking at possibly adding a small area down by Highway 7 in St. Bonnie in commercial. We've heard from people, especially in our southwest area, that we do need a little more commercial, and that's what we'll add.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Steve Livermore. Driver speed and inattentive driving are a huge safety issue along County Road 15. How can we get to the bike and walking trails without taking our lives in our hands?
Well, I'm happy to go first for this time. I think that that comes around awareness, to make sure that we get the proper amount of signage up there, and potentially, I don't know if lighting would be an additional benefit up there. I think that it really comes down to awareness and potentially getting some more signage out there and helping those individuals. Thank you.
Mike Molitor?
Could you repeat the question, please?
Driver speed and inattentive driving are a huge safety issue along County Road 15. How can we get to the bike and walking trails without taking our lives in our hands?
I think there's a couple of issues. While I agree signage probably will help, I think there's also enforcement. I think this issue isn't specific just to County Road 15, while this particular case might be. Inattentive driving is obviously a big problem that needs to be dealt with by public safety as well, our law enforcement officers. And I think as we partner with our fellow agencies from Hennepin County and MnDOT, there's some opportunities to use dollars for changes such as we see at County Road 15 and 19 in Navarre, where there's a pedestrian crossing with flashing lights. They've added the same thing on County Road 15 in Orono, and another one like that in Sherwood. That might be appropriate for our area as well.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
I agree. Signage is obviously one area. More patrolling and enforcement of our speeding laws and so on. Messaging in our newsletters and on our website is a good idea, as well as just general education of the public through other media sources. Recently, I was at the high school and they did a mock crash, and it was about texting while driving. Things like that. And it was a joint effort between the Minnetrista Police Department and Fire Department in Mound, and a lot of different agencies came together to put this on. It was a very good experience for our kids, as well as the adults that were there. So things like that you could put on YouTube. I think it will be aired. But just letting people know that they need to pay attention. It is a rural road, and it's windy and curvy and can be very dark. I don't know if we can put lights out there, but signage and patrolling would probably be our best effort.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce?
It's not really fair going last
No,
on
it's
this
not, is
question. Because there's signage, there's enforcement, and there's education, and that's about the three things that you can do. I went to the mock crash thing at the high school too. My daughter was participating in it, and I think educating the public and posting those videos on YouTube and making sure that people understand how important it is to pay attention while they're driving and not texting and making phone calls where they're driving. It was a profound presentation that day that affected a lot of people, and I, for one, will never text and drive ever again or take a phone call while I'm driving. So signage, enforcement, and education.
Thank you. The next question, we'll start with Lisa Whalen. Being a city council member, well, in this case, we're a mayor, is a time commitment. Are you prepared for the responsibilities involved in this position and the obligations attached?
Absolutely. Yes, like I said, I served on the council for 12 years prior to this. I was on the council from January of '99 through December of 2010. So when I took office 2 years ago, I kind of knew what I was in for. Not quite, but kind of. Yes, I'm prepared to put in as many hours as need be. I have proven that I will do that because I have done that. I often put in 20, 30, even sometimes 40 hours a week. I'm on my phone, I'm texting, I'm calling City Hall, maybe too much, but they like me. It not only takes time, but it takes effort, and it takes persistence, and there's a lot of things as mayor that you have to do maybe that council members don't, but I go to a lot of meetings, primarily to make sure that Minnetrista is represented. And I want to make sure that we're out there and that Minnetrista is well represented. And that's what I do. One of the things I do.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce.
What was the question again?
Being a city council member is a time commitment. Are you prepared for the responsibilities involved in this position and the obligations attached?
Yes, in fact, since I signed up to run, I've been coming to the city council meetings and the work sessions just to find out what's going on. So I'm not even a city council person yet. And it's important. This is our community. This is where we live. This is where we work. And I have a strong commitment and take that responsibility seriously. So yes, absolutely.
Thank you. Steve Livermore.
Absolutely. Before I even put my name in the hat, I had sat down with the family and we went over it. We talked about things that potentially could change. Sat down with Mike from the city and found out what time of commitment and what kind of responsibilities I would have in this position. And I'm very comfortable with it. I work from home mostly, so I'm right here around the corner, if you will. And I have the time. I do a lot of other volunteer activities, but as we always say in the volunteering committee, you find the people that are really busy because those are the ones that do things. And so I'm absolutely prepared to take on the responsibility and spend the time doing this. Thank you.
Mike Molitor.
Yes, I actually have some experience in this, being on the planning commission. We don't have quite the load that the city council does, but we do meet every month. We have, and the meetings can go from an hour to past midnight. And we receive packets from the city prior to that can often be well over 100 pages of material to read. We usually make an effort to try to visit sites that are in question for the meetings. So all that does take time, and I've done that for the past 5 years, and will continue to do that as a council member. Also, being on the planning committee, the comprehensive plan committee, is additional time commitment as well. So again, I've demonstrated that I do have the time for that, and will continue to do so.
Thank you. This is a rather long question, so I can repeat it if you need. The first person that will go for this question is going to be, I'm looking at my grid here, is going to be Steve Livermore. West Tonka School District voters approved $22.95 million in bond funding payable over 15 years for the purpose of building a 600-seat performing arts center and a community athletics and recreation center at Mound West Tonka High School. Will Minnetrista residents have input on this project and subsequent programming? Will residents be able to participate in an arts commission, or will this focus more on Mound residents despite being paid by all of us?
Well, you guys unfortunately caught me at a little bit of a disadvantage. I'm in the Waconia School District, so it's a little probably outside of my expertise. So, I'm probably just going to have to say I pass, and if this came up to me, I would do the research and I'd find out what I can about it. My gut tells me, much like, I'm in Minnetrista, but yet I go to Waconia school districts, and they just did a referendum 2 years ago. They're building a brand new high school there, and or they're swapping the high school and middle school and building a new elementary school. And certainly me as a Minnetrista resident, because I'm in the Waconia school district, have access to their facilities and are able to go in there. So I assume that that's the same thing that's going to happen here between Minnetrista and the Mound West Tonka School District. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Molitor.
I think it's really, a little bit to Steve's point as well, I think it's really important to, while the tax dollars all show up on our property tax statement, it's always important to understand the city has one component, the school district has another component, and the county has another component. And as city council, we work with, or the city government as a whole works with the other entities, but they are set separately. So the school district referendum is the school district, not the city council. We do have a history of working with the school district. I know from the planning commission, the school district came to us last year for a variance for signage. for the football field that was passed. We've worked with them on land for the water treatment facilities. So there is a strong cooperation between West Tonka and the city of Minnetrista, but they are two different entities. But we will, I think, be able to share resources to the extent possible and keep that cooperation going.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
Well, that was a school district referendum, not a city referendum, and those will be school district facilities. So, however, as Mr. Molitor pointed out, that we do have a good working relationship with the school district. And in fact, recently I have had numerous meetings with Kevin Borg, the superintendent, and we have worked cooperatively on a number of different projects, such as the water treatment plant, as Mr. Molitor pointed out. So I would assume that we will continue to work together. In fact, I talked to him recently about working cooperatively on other future projects, joint effort. So there will be the cooperation, but ultimately they will have the say in terms of who and how those facilities get used, and certainly will help our citizens get as much use out of it as they can.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce?
And again, I think they covered most of the points. I think it's complicated because in Minnetrista we have 4 school districts, and you have open enrollment. So my daughter, we live in Minnetrista, and we're in the Watertown School District, but my daughter goes to West Tonka. So as far as who's going to use what, I think it gets really complicated, and ultimately it's the school district's project, and they'll determine how it's used. And of course, we're going to cooperate with the school district because we all need to do that.
Thank you. We're in a time where raising taxes has become an issue. What alternatives to generating revenue would you explore? And first will be Shannon Bruce.
Glad you got that one.
You know, raising taxes is an issue, and I think we need to look at what we're raising taxes for. I think there's sort of a mindset that you have to raise the tax levy every single year because you don't want to go a year without raising the tax levy, because if you don't, then people scream the following year if you have to raise it more. And I think this mindset of just automatically having to raise taxes every year because we're afraid to justify what we're doing with the money is not a good approach. So I'm not going to propose different ways to raise taxes. I think we need to scrutinize what we're doing, and I think we need to raise taxes if we have to raise taxes, and we have to look at what we're raising taxes for and make sure we justify what we're doing and not do it automatically every year. Thanks.
Thank you. Steve Livermore?
Could you repeat the question, please?
We are in a time where raising taxes has become an issue. What alternatives to generating revenue would you explore?
So this question is really more around trying to generate additional revenues. And, you know, there are certainly you could go on and look at some fee structures or look at some usage fees to try and make sure that the things that the city is paying for are being appropriately compensated for by the individuals that use those facilities. But off the top of my head, I really can't come up with a solid plan. But again, like I said, it would take some research to figure out where the money's going, and then look to see who's benefiting from those expenses and make sure that those are being paid for by the appropriate residents. Thank you.
Thank you. Mike Molitor?
A couple things on this. Obviously, the question was directed mainly at the revenue side, but you can't look at that in a vacuum, as been stated. We have to look at the expense side as well. But I will focus a little bit more just on the revenue side. One of the main concerns we have in Minnetrista from an infrastructure perspective is the road system. Other cities have an assessment policy, and that can vary quite a bit based on property. That might be something we take a look at. We'll have to consider that, I think, as we do more investment in the road. And also, you know, we have a pretty good, I think, approach right now on fees that we assess for water usage, sewer usage, and I think that's important to keep that so people can understand the value of what they're paying for. And I also think as we look at fees for new development, to make sure that they are paying their full share, not just for the development that they impact, but for the surrounding areas as well.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
Well, raising additional revenue for a city is always difficult because we are somewhat limited on what we can do. We can't start businesses and create enterprises and so on. And we're also limited on our investments. State law requires us to invest our capital that we have in reserve in a very, very modest, very safe manner. However, saying that, the city is going to be looking at expanding our commercial area down on Highway 7. So that will expand our tax base without, and potentially raising our revenues without spreading that out over our residential properties. That might be one way. But the other thing is, I think every year we look very, very closely at our spending. So rather than raising taxes, we can look at how we can manage our money more appropriately and make sure that we're doing our due diligence in spending and making sure that we're being as prudent as possible with the dollars that we have.
Thank you. How specifically would you improve transparency in city government? And first will be Mike Molitor.
I think within transparency, obviously it's been a hot button here. First and foremost, I think conflicts of interest need to be disclosed. That's been a big part with planning commission work that I've seen, is to make sure that we're not financially tied to a particular project, and I've been very adamant about that. And I do not, other than my house here, I don't own property here that is subject to conflicts of interest. Transparency, obviously we have our meetings, planning commission as well as the city council are published via YouTube. There's an improved redesigned city website that has meeting minutes. Those are all things that need to be kept up, and we have a newsletter I think that will continue to keep going. And I know that we've hired someone just specifically for some social media content as well. So those are all efforts we can do to help transparency.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
Well, that was one of the big things that we talked about at the last election, and this is what we've done so far. One, we make sure that the council doesn't talk, myself including all the council members, don't talk in more than two people on one given subject. In other words, we don't violate the open meeting law policies and laws. Transparency means a lot of things, but all of our meetings are open. We hold them here at City Hall in these council chambers where people can come and they can be part of and listen to the meetings. And that's not just for the council meetings, that's the work sessions, the council meetings, the planning commission, park commission, all of our meetings. The minutes are published, they're on our website, and we did spend a lot of money and time and effort creating a new website. It is a much better website. It maybe needs some more tweaking, but that's another way to be more transparent. We also improved our newsletter to the city, to the residents in our city, and we'll continue to make improvements on that as well. And we're going to also hold a State of the City address later this fall. Again, just more information to our residents that we can get out there. Thank you.
Shannon Bruce?
Yeah, the only thing I think I'd add to transparency and exposing conflicts of interest, I think, is just honoring the spirit of the open bidding laws in the Minnesota statutes. I think because we're trying to gain confidence and the trust of the public, I think we have to go a little further than we need to sometimes. I know there are exceptions to complying with open bidding, and there are exceptions to getting around it and not having to use it under certain circumstances. But I think we ought to err on the side of open bidding rather than just automatically awarding things to people that have always had them awarded to them. And the conflict of interest, I think, is an issue. We need to police that and not be afraid to call it out if we see it.
Thank you. Steve Livermore?
Yeah, I obviously would agree with all my candidates up here. In addition to that, though, I think the three of us, I think that I won't speak for them, but I think a little bit, given the IT background and our background in analytics and data crunching and whatnot, I think it would be an interesting thing to go out there and potentially look at some of the data we have within the city and see if we can expose that out to the end users through the website so that maybe they get a better understanding of where their tax dollars are being spent. And maybe they can zoom in on their own property and know Hennepin County and and FEMA and some of those other sites are doing a lot more with GIS today. I'd like to see us maybe as a city take that on and then use that GIS to lay additional attributes to each one of our properties. So now I understand that I'm a water user, and maybe I understand what projects are coming up nearby me and things like that. So, that would maybe then also give the community and the citizens the idea that everything we're doing is open and out front there, and they can find it anytime they want. Thank you.
Thank you. What would you like to do to bring new businesses to the city, and what specific plans do you have to retain existing businesses? Lisa Whalen.
Thank you. Well, we don't have a lot of businesses. And, a lot of people have said, when I was door knocking last time, why don't we have a grocery store? Why don't we have at least a restaurant or a coffee shop? And that is something that the city wants to look at next year. We would hire a consultant to help us figure out, one, where and where it would go. Most likely it'll be down on the Highway 7 corridor, and not in a rural area. Just want to emphasize that. But the other thing that a consultant would help us do is help us decide on, number one, what the city would have to do in order to be ready for commercial, and also what kind of commercial is going to be appropriate for our city and is going to be used. So you can't just go out there and say, oh, please, Target, come and be here. There's a lot of work that goes into it, and that's what we're planning on doing next year.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce.
I'd like to keep Minnetrista. And I know development is going to happen. I think we need to be careful what kind of development we allow here in the commercial zoning that's going in down on 7. I think that's a logical place to put it. I'd like to see smaller stores. I'd hate to see a Home Depot or a Target go in down there on 7. I think that doesn't fit our character here. So I think, I think hiring a consultant is great. I haven't been on city council, so I don't know what the plans are for that commercial development there. I'm just getting up to speed on those discussions. But we just need to be careful and make sure that we find companies and developments that fit Minnetrista.
Thank you. Steve Livermore.
Yeah, I would agree with both my candidates. There's not a lot of business today, obviously, but that's part of what attracted us here. But I do think that along 7 there's enough commercial and retail business there that putting something in there and making sure that we have the right covenants and the right design parameters around what they can put in and whatnot. I certainly wouldn't want to see a strip mall right down there. I mean, I can see 7 from my house, so I prefer not to have a nice bright light out there. It'd be interesting, and I know this is probably a little bit of a take back, but there was a restaurant down there for about 6 months, Timothy's, I think, maybe. And so, but it never went anywhere, so it was always kind of intriguing to me what happened with that. And they have done some development there in St. Bonnie, and it seems to have gone pretty well, so I think there is certainly appetite out there. And there's certainly with Kings Point Road and with Palmer Point and with Turtle Creek and Hunter's Crest, there's certainly a lot of people out there that could use some additional retail down there. Thank you.
Mike Molitor.
I think, first of all, as we've kind of talked about, it's important to recognize that Minnetrista is a residential community. So I think to the point about a failed restaurant or restaurants, main part of what drives a retail type of business is having a mass of people to be able to support that. And that doesn't necessarily go with our representing rural values. So it's a kind of a fine line to walk with retail and commercial development. I do think, though, that we need to have the zoning in place for that. Along 7 makes sense. And I think once we do that, I'm more of a market-based approach to let the businesses come in, work under those parameters, rather than the city spending a whole lot of time soliciting businesses that may or may not be appropriate here. So I really believe in a marketplace approach to that.
Thank you. Next question. Give actual examples of how, as a leader, you have enabled differing parties' opinions and options to come to consensus. And we'll start with Steve Livermore.
Excellent. This is a really close to my heart kind of thing. One of the things I do as a consultant is what we call data center consolidations. And essentially what that is you have a remote or satellite data center and you have a corporate one. And at times that the value of that remote is outweighed by bringing that in and doing consolidation. And so whenever I go on one of those things, I'm always kind of like the black hat guy, right? Because I'm going in there to take jobs away from these people and to transfer those over into the corporate world. And so I on numerous occasions, I've done a dozen of these things. And I go in and I make sure that, again, it's respectful and it's appropriate conversation, but it's direct, right? Hey, this is what's going to happen. These are how things are going to go. You lay it out there. You make sure that everyone feels like they've been heard. You make sure that you are very respectful of their time and of their opinions. And at the end of it, you hope, this is always my goal, is that when I leave there, they take my design or my ideas and they own them and they present them as their own. And to me, that is really the show of someone who can work with people and get them on board with an idea.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Molitor?
I think, the big example I'll point to is the Red Oak Golf Course development that went in here, or is going in right now, that went before the Planning Commission a couple of years back. First of all, I went to the neighborhood meeting about that. It was Pat at the golf course. And I think listening to people and understanding the rules that we're working within, set by Met Council and by the city, but also understanding that there were some changes that we went through a couple of different plat drawings of what that looked like. And I've heard quite a bit of input as to whether or not we take, from the developer, if we take park funds versus taking park land. There's a park there that could have been expanded. Also, it gives some input to looking at how the traffic flows through Grandview versus having a dead end. And so those are some ideas that I brought to the table that I think are an example of that.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
Well, consensus building is a large part of the mayor's job, and I would say I do this on every single meeting, basically. And that doesn't say that we're on opposite ends, but there's always you always try and strive for consensus. Sometimes, most of the time, we've achieved it. There's very few times where we haven't had a unanimous decision. Consensus building and going through the process and listening to every single council member's opinion and their views, that's very important. And also allowing them to give their input and to consider their input. That's part of the consensus building. We don't always see eye to eye, but yet if we listen to the other person, we listen to their maybe differing opinion, and then think, well, maybe that will work. That's how you build consensus, and that's what we've been doing for the past 2 years. It is an important part of the mayor's position, and I work hard at doing that.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce?
As a government affairs specialist for AT&T, I used to testify in front of city council meetings, and part of my job was convincing city councils not to tax long-distance services. And they all wanted to tax long-distance services because they wanted revenue. And so it was an educational process. It was understanding why they needed the money, what kind of revenues did they need, what kind of revenues were they going to get from taxing long-distance services, and what kind of harm was going to come from doing that. And a lot of times it was elderly people that were going to end up with higher taxes on their long-distance bill that they couldn't afford, and they weren't aware of some of the things that were going to happen. So it was a give and take, and it was understanding first what they wanted before I could begin to educate them on what my purpose was. So I think that's just understanding first.
Thank you. What is your plan for attracting and keeping, I'm sorry, I just wanted to let you know this will be our last question before closing statements. What is your plan for attracting and keeping high caliber city staff with such a small government or such a small city in a competitive market? And the first one will be Mike Molitor.
I think the key to that is creating a good work environment, and this goes back to a little bit what Lisa was talking about before, about keeping a good rapport with the staff. When we look at things from the Planning Commission, most items come to the Planning Commission with a recommendation from the staff. And if we're working and having the same mindset that the staff has or something similar, we generally like to be on the same page, and I think that helps create a working environment that the staff likes to come to. We've obviously had some issues with that in the past, but I think that's in the past. And I think just keeping the communication open and understanding what the concerns are, and also making sure that we have an environment that people appreciate.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen?
Well, first of all, I always tell our staff, come to work and have fun. You know, if you come to work and you don't have fun and you don't like your job, then it is no fun. So really, we have been working on this over the last 2 years, and I think we've made tremendous progress. In fact, like I said earlier, we have a great relationship and mutual respect between the council and staff. I think the other thing is staff and council, we both need to understand our limits and our boundaries. The council is here to set policy, and staff is to implement those policies. Council is not here to run the city. That's staff's job. So as long as we understand our roles in city government, that also is a big help in creating good staff-council relationships. Being open and honest with each other, but between the council and staff, is also a good thing to do, because that creates more respect and admiration, for mutual admiration. So I think those are some of the things that we'll continue to do. Paying them adequately is another thing that we have to look at, because it is a very competitive market.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce?
I think the concept of servant leadership is what comes to mind, and I believe that servant leadership leads to happy employees. I think whenever you approach an employee with the mindset of how can I help you do your job better, how can I provide you with a better salary, with a better environment, with whatever you need to get your job done, and serving our employees and giving them what they need to do a good job, I think that's the best approach.
Thank you. Steve Livermore?
I certainly don't disagree with any of the comments that have been made, but I've done some hiring over the years, and I think what the big thing is really is a challenge. Make sure people have a challenge, much to Lisa's point, make sure they're having a little bit of fun, right? You want to make sure that they're enjoying getting up in the morning. And also, trying to sell Minnetrista as a small town or small government environment where they can really have an impact. And they can really make a difference in people's lives. There's the citizenship is coming in here every day. You guys get to impact them directly, give them responsibilities, give them opportunity for growth, and sell it as, you know what, you can be a jack of all trades, or you can learn a number of different roles within the city government. And certainly if you want to go on into a larger organization, that will serve you well, but at the same time, you're still going to have to be as close to the people as you are here in Minnetrista. Thank you.
Thank you. And now it's time for closing statements. We're going to go in reverse order. So Mike Molitor, you're first.
Yep.
We have 2 minutes.
2 minutes, all right. I think the thing that I want to emphasize the most is it's important, being on the city council, to have some background and some experience in dealing with a lot of the issues that the council addresses, and I believe that through my experience on the planning commission, I've been able to get as close to that as possible without actually being on the council, and I'd like to be able to go to that next step and be on the council to represent everybody and take advantage of the fact of the people I've met and interacted with and understand their concerns and bring it to issues outside of just the planning council's purview. I also think it's important looking at the comprehensive plan, the work I'm doing there on the steering committee has a big impact on the city as a whole, and I'd like to be able to carry that forward as a council member as well. And I think when we look at the demographics of the city, I'd like to think that I reflect a lot of what people have here. I mean, the fact that we're all about 14-year residents is a kind of a common theme, and people here longer or shorter, but I think that's a pretty fair representation of the citizens of the city, and I think that's important that people that represent the city on the council are generally a fair portion of what the city looks like. So I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Steve Livermore?
First of all, I'd like to say that I think that that the city of Minnetrista is lucky to have all these candidates up here tonight. I was talking to them earlier, and I'm comfortable with any one of us, or any two of us getting this position going forward. It's nice to see some IT background that are going to come to the council. I think that's a good thing. Also, I'd like to tell maybe a little bit more about the fact that I do come from one of the developments here in Minnetrista. And while certainly not, wouldn't taint my votes or anything, but I think it's another perspective that needs to be represented on this council. Up to date, we really haven't had that before. I'm a city water user. I live in the neighborhoods. I've been on the HOA out there for 2 terms now. I serve as the bookkeeper. I serve as the website master or admin. I do a lot of things within that or within my community to keep that neighborhood together. And I think if you ever go out there, I know we're way back in the backwoods and it's hard to get to us and there's no outlet. But you'll see a subdivision that's 14 years old that looks like it was built last year. I swear to you, we can do a great job out there. One of the programs I implemented out there was an Arbor Day program where we went through and spent $2,000 every year for 3 years to plant trees along the boulevards to enhance the rural feeling of our neighborhood. The other thing I'd like to bring up, my experiences, I did a technology audit, or excuse me, a technology roadmap out of Waconia Park District, or Waconia School District, excuse me. That kind of sparked me a little bit. I also did a what they call a process maturity assessment at the state of North Dakota. And what that's about is you go in and you look at the processes they use to run the organization, and then you put that against a scorecard. And an A is not always where you want to be, right? And that's something we need to take into account here at the council, right? I don't have to be the best at everything, but I have to be good enough that I'm providing the right kind of value and the right kind of things to the people that I serve, especially in government, right? You want to at least get to the C, maybe some B's out there to make sure that we're doing some things that are really beneficial to our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Shannon Bruce.
When I signed up to run in August, I started coming to the city council meetings and the work sessions just to get some background on some of these important issues coming up after the election. Issues like the comp plan. I heard a fascinating discussion about that last Monday night, and acquiring land for a water tower. We're going to be doing that soon. And also zoning changes for accommodating commercial development. And if I'm elected, I will continue to thoroughly study and research these important issues as they're coming up so that I can be a voice that is a voice of sound judgment that isn't afraid to ask the hard questions to make sure that we get at the best solutions for Minnetrista. Thanks.
Thank you. Lisa Whalen.
Well, first, I don't have an opponent, but I still am asking everybody to vote for me. So please vote for me when you go to the polls in November. I've been your mayor for 2 years, and my background, and I have a lot of experience in leadership roles, both in government as well as private organizations. But it's not just the experience in leadership that qualifies you to be a mayor or a leader in any organization, but it's also your leadership style. And I want to say, I've tried to be inclusive rather than exclusive. I listen to people. I consider all sides of an issue. I look at both sides and make decisions based on facts. And I do my homework. I work hard, and I'm committed to Minnetrista. That is really the one big thing I want to send off to you and let you know I love this city. I want it to be even better than it is today. And I've lived here for many years and I've seen a lot of changes. I've worked hard at creating a better reputation for our city metro-wide. I go to a lot of regional meetings, and I'm on the Northwest League as well as the Regional Council of Mayors, and I've gone to conferences, and it's made a difference. We now have a better reputation than we did a couple years ago. I also have worked hard with staff to create a good staff-council relation, and I can tell you that it is a very good relation. I've also worked hard at gaining the public trust and having open and honest meetings and transparency in our government, and I'll continue to do that. I'm a firm believer that we have to follow the laws and we have to follow the rules, and I've done that, and I will continue to do that. I'm a firm believer in trying to keep the character of Minnetrista what it is today, and make sure that we get good developments and that we grow slowly, strategically, and make sure that it fits within our community. I'll continue to listen if I'm reelected, and I'm looking forward to all of the wonderful positive things that Minnetrista has before us.
Thank you. This concludes the Minnetrista Mayoral and City Council Candidate Forum. Thank you to our audience as well as the participants for being here at this recorded program. Please check the City of Minnetrista's website for replay. The candidates will be available in the lobby for a short time to answer further questions. Thank you to our Voters Service Committee for organizing this event. Thank you to the League of Women Voters Wayzata Plymouth area members for helping with this event. And also thank you to the City of Minnetrista for allowing us the use of the City Council chambers, and to TED Life for recording the forum. Please note that there is a constitutional amendment on your ballot. Reading, shall the Minnesota Constitution be amended to remove state lawmakers' power to set their own salaries and instead establish an independent, citizens-only council to prescribe salaries of lawmakers? You must vote yes or no. Failure to vote on this will be a no vote. League of Women Voters has a fact sheet available for your viewing at our table or on our website, lwvmn.org. This amendment has bipartisan support. Please remember to vote on Tuesday, November 8th from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you.